Here's what Dr. David Gushee, author and professor of Christian ethics at Mercer University, had to say about my upcoming book, The Edge of the Inside, releasing March 31st. Quote, a striking memoir of a former evangelical machine pastor pushed out of the center of that world and to the very edges, not just of church, but of Christian faith, spirituality, and theology. An elegant book, The Edge of the Inside, could become a post-evangelical classic. Highly recommended, end quote. If you'd like to read a copy before it comes out, we'd love to have you join our book launch team. You can find out more at edgeoftheinside.com or at the link in the show notes. Welcome to another episode of Cabernet and Pray, where we sip the wine and we stir the faith. And today we are doing some stirring of that faith. We've got my friend Collin Packer, and just an incredible conversation that gets into so many things about the church and conversations that the church needs to have. Collin is the director of strategic development for LTR Ministries, which is an organization that engages white Christians in the ministry of reconciliation and justice. He was a lead pastor for 13 years in churches in Denver and Dallas. He was a communications director for a Texas state representative in 2023. And now he works at the intersection of faith and the public square as an advocate for racial and social justice. He has been married for 21 years to Holly, and they have 3 kids together, and just a gem of a friend. I've known him for a number of years now, and I was so excited to be able to get his perspective on this episode. This is episode 67, Faith and the Public Square.
I've never shared this with anybody publicly.
If this was SportsCenter, that would be like such a hot take. Skip Bayless would have no idea. Stephen A. Smith would have no idea what to say if you drop that down. That is so good.
The joke I always say is like, how'd you learn so much? You got to drink a lot.
The power of food and beverage to lubricate an environment.
Resistance to change is hurting the church.
I'm not in the camp that God has a penis or a vagina or a body at all. I'm in the camp that God is a universal spirit.
This is the strangest podcast that I have been on. I don't even know what to do.
I'm kind of geeked up about this wine.
So this is my second glass, and it delivers a little more of a punch than I expected. So if I get a little loopy, it's your fault. You told me to drink it on the show.
I will also say as a confession, I am a lightweight. So I've had like 3 sips of this wine and I'm already feeling it. So this is fun.
You've uncovered the mystery. You've exposed the formula.
You've just duct taped together a number of things that aren't normally hanging out together, and I'm here for it.
We're going to sit down at a table, we're going to have a glass of wine and some food, and we're going to talk about the beauty of Jesus.
Thanks for what you're doing with this podcast and for the creative way you're doing it and the beautiful, positive spirit in which you're doing it.
I really appreciate this venue, what you're doing. It is fun, and yet you dig into the deep stuff.
I've heard about your podcast for a long time, and I love that you're a pastor and that you explore the world of faith through wine. That's very unique.
I never thought of church history in terms of wine drinkers. I love this question. Really got my mind rolling.
You had me with herbaceous notes, I want you to know. I'm ready to just stay here and live in the wine tour.
I will never forget the first time I bought a bottle of wine by myself, which was yesterday.
If you're familiar with drunk history, I thought it's like drunk theology. So I
got a little spicy there. It's the peach wine.
Apparently the wine is, here we are. Queer we are. Beer we are. No, it's wine, Jeremy.
By the way, drinking this Pinot Grigio at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is making me even more direct in my communication than I normally would be.
I know why you have your guests drink wine. It makes sense now. Yeah, I get it. A little bit of liquid courage to really unleash the beast.
I think you've got a good podcast. So throwing the wine bit in there, that's nice, doesn't it? Cabernet and Pray, yeah.
Well, when I asked today's guest what he wanted to get out of the episode, he wrote this, and I quote, "I just want an opportunity to give people an alternative vision of how Christians can navigate the shitstorm in our country and provide a winsome public witness of Jesus' vision for the common good." Welcome to the podcast, Collin.
Man, the shitstorm is going, isn't it?
I felt like it was an appropriate word to introduce the episode.
Sorry, Mom, but we'll make this work.
We talk about real things on this podcast, Collin, so we're allowed to use language. So you
We're
might
not in
need
our
to-
old worlds, are we?
You might need to tell your mom, hey, maybe skip this one. Well, before we get into our conversation today, let's talk about what we're drinking. So there we go. There's our transition. I'm switching it up today, Collin. I normally have, I want to say bougie wine, but I normally have a pretty nice bottle of something that, you know, I'm a member of something or I have some connection. Not today. Today we are going Trader Joe's. This is this is not $2 Chuck. I want to let that be known.
Okay.
But
right.
here's the story. My wife was at Trader Joe's the other day, and this is Trader Joe's Reserve line. And I don't know if she watched a TikTok video or talked to an employee, but somehow got it in her head that the Reserve line was actually like the steal of a deal. And so she brought it home to me and was like, hey, I want you to try this. So I was like, okay, not my normal bottle that I'm drinking, admittedly, but I'll try it. This is a Bordeaux blend, which if you've listened to episodes before, I've gone off on how much I love Bordeaux blends. And so here's what I'm going to say. It's actually not bad. It's not a bad daily drinker. Just go to what I noticed about it compared to what I think of a Bordeaux blend. It doesn't have the minerality to it that I really enjoy, some of those tertiary notes. And it doesn't have the finish. It's not like this big, robust finish like, oh, that thing just sits in your mouth and, wow, lingers. Doesn't have that. Just kind of just is done once you're sipping it. But I think there's a place for all things, Collin. So I'm rocking the Trader Joe's 2023 Medoc Grand Vin de Bordeaux Reserve. Not $2 Chuck, friends. The Reserve line. So, hey, if you're looking for a daily drinker, I think this is like $10. I mean, it's not $2, $10. Not too bad. So that's what I've got. What are you drinking today?
So I have Grape Creek Vineyards. This is a Texas wine. Some don't know that exists, but I come from Texas. This is the Originalist. It's a 2021, and it's a red blend. So we got our Texas red blend that we're going to enjoy. I'm actually a member of this club. It's one of our favorite places to get away to in Fredericksburg, Texas. And so, but I think this is my first time with the Originalist. So I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, so we got to see your reaction. What do you think?
I like it. Fruit forward. That's what I'm tasting here. Raspberry, cherries, something like that.
Okay.
So I'm trying to move forward in this wine journey, and so you were helping me. Your podcast, I mean, theology is great, right? But the wine is where it's at. So thanks for. Is it a screw top or is it a cork? The $10.
It was a cork.
Okay.
It was a cork.
All right, they are moving up. I like that.
Which is truly surprising because I feel like more and more of the world's going to the screw top. So to have Trader Joe's holding out, and I don't know, it's been a while since I've had $2 Chuck, so I don't know if that's a screw top. I would imagine, but maybe they're making it elegant across the board with the corks. I don't know. Well, hey, hopefully if you're able to enjoy a glass with us, you've got something fun as well. I know many of you listen to episodes while you're working out or you have some activity you're doing, so that's great. We're happy that you're listening to us as well. But if you are able to enjoy a glass, I think it makes the episode better. It certainly makes it better to record it. So that's what we're doing. Now, Collin is a regular listener to the pod, so he knows this next question's probably coming. Although I didn't give him all the questions. But, Collin, for people who want to know, you and I have been friends for a while, so this isn't the first time you and I have talked, and we'll get into a little bit of that. But just for people to kind of get a feeling of your background, a bit of your story, I like to ask the opening question. But you look at your faith journey the last 10 years. There's been some major shifts for you in that time. One of them in particular I do want to follow up and talk about, which you can probably guess. But talk us a little bit about that. Talk to us. What is the last 10 years in your faith? How has that changed for you?
So I was thinking 10 years ago, right? 2016, everyone's sharing their 10-year pictures back on social media and all this. And I haven't done that, but I mean, a lot has changed in 10 years in our world. I was a pastor at the time. I was a lead pastor for a church here in Texas. And if anyone is familiar with the background, Churches of Christ is actually my background. And so I think Malcolm Gladwell refers to us as the fundamentalists of the fundamentalists. So there is a badge of honor.
quite a title.
But yeah, that's right. So I am no longer in that role anymore. In 2021, I moved out of full-time ministry. It was an evolving theology journey for me. It was definitely a switch of calling from that church in a suburban white context to really a calling toward racial and social justice work. It's been a journey when it comes to all kinds of things that we can get into today. But yeah, I'm no longer in a church. I'm meeting in a home with a faith community in the area. About half of our church is LGBTQ community. It is a far cry from the world I grew up in. And the church
your old world would be so disappointed in you.
Oh, they are. Oh, I can't. Mom, again, don't watch the show. Yeah. But no, I'm glad to be where I'm at. I'm grateful for the relationships that emerged. I wouldn't trade it. But it is different than 10 years ago for sure.
So you and I connected, as I recall, and we'll see what you can recall. I remember, I think I had maybe shared my blog post about why I was leaving in 2020 or something is kind of how I remember it, that I had shared like, hey, I'm stepping away from this. And as I recall it, you reached out to me and we had met like in passing years before that. So we knew of each other, but we didn't really know each other. And I remember you saying like, wow, just read what you wrote and like, hey, thanks for doing what you're doing. And then you said, I'm feeling something similar in my own story. And I remember that, I think you were one of the first people, when you go through something like that and you feel like your world is falling apart. And I think a lot of, especially listeners to this pod, have had that feeling, right? Of like, I was in a faith community, everything made sense, my beliefs made sense, and then you changed your mind or you saw something or something changed and you're like, I can't go back. And then it just kind of unravels. And then you feel like, well, I got nothing to offer. You were one of like the early like encouragements to me of like, maybe this story that has been like debilitating to me can actually offer some hope to other people who are going through it. So I'd love to hear from your point of view. Like, I know my journey. What was your journey like? I have to imagine it had a similar level of pain, confusion, and all that. And I think, again, a lot of people, especially listening to this podcast, can relate with that. Love to hear that. What transitioned from you saying, I want to be a lead pastor to I don't want to be a lead pastor and becoming the version of you are today?
Yeah. Yeah, you were the trailblazer out west, right? So I remember exactly where I was when I made that call. Our family was on a national parks trip. We were near Yellowstone National Park. I can remember exactly where we were that morning before we went into the park. It was 2020, and I didn't know how much longer I was going to last. And this was before George Floyd and a sermon I preached after that really was speaking of shitstorms, even more that came. And so, yeah, you were somebody I reached out to that I just thought, okay, this is a path I'm probably on. It was more out of pastoral concern of just like a friend, somebody that I respected that I know is walking through a hard time. And so why not reach out and just make sure things are good? But I also wondered what I might learn through that, if there were connections. And you made a connection with a friend out of the LA area that was such a help to me as well, that opened up new networks of people. But yeah, it's probably about a year after that I began a conversation with my elders at the church. There was tension around some of the racial justice work that I'd done, city of Dallas and so forth. And so it was becoming clear that I was either going to be asked to lower my voice, and there is a calling for some to do that long, hard work in a church context. But for me, it was really a season that needed more louder voices, especially white leaders, to speak up about the racial reckoning that was happening and not hold our voices back or filter it. And so I went to the elders and I said, it's time to transition. I had no idea what was next. But you convinced me something would pop up. I mean, it worked for Jeremy. Everything must be perfect in his life, right? It'll work for me.
Look at me, I'm thriving.
Thanks for being that example. So many of us are on the same journey. Thanks to you, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And it's been a journey, right? I mean, for the last 5 years now, I've been in 4 different jobs. I've never passed the 12-month mark. And finally, current role I'm in right now, looks like we're going to get there. Maybe my bosses won't watch this role and that'll help me too, but
you're doing it, Collin, you're doing it.
This is actually the first job I feel like I'm there. And it took some healing to do what I'm doing right now, which we'll, I'm sure, talk about as we go through it. But I'm back speaking to white churches. I'm just not worshiping in that same space and finding freedom and new faith community, new friends. But yeah, you were a catalyst for that. You were helpful in connecting me with others. The podcast has been helpful to continue those conversations and just listen in. So I'm glad to be a long-time listener, first-time caller kind of thing, right?
That's beautiful. Okay, so let's talk about from your point of view, because I love that you said louder voice and softer voice, or quieter voice, because that is exactly what it was for me. It's exactly what it was for you. Of, hey, you can be here, you just can't say the things you're saying, and there is a personality of a pastor that's fine with that. It's like, oh, cool, I'll just dial it down a little bit. I want to shepherd everybody, and they're fine. For guys like you and I, and for probably many people listening to the podcast, that's not their personality. They're like, no, things are not the way they should be. We should be able to call it out. We should be able to talk about it. Why do you think that is such a conversation that so many churches don't want to have? And I'm curious, because you say now you still talk to these churches, but you're not worshiping there. Why is it you have to sometimes step out, do you think, before you can actually say the things you need to say?
Yeah, I don't think I understood what ministry was really about. My dad was in ministry. I know your dad was too. I mean, this PK journey, you'd think we would have picked up something along the way to know this may not be the right word.
We should have been a little bit smarter about it.
I mean, our dad lied to us, like, let's be honest. And I appreciate that. Like, I have much less harm in my life as a PK than others do, because I just didn't know all there was, but it led me into a career that I had no idea about. So what I remember was going to conferences and hearing these like prophetic sermons when I was in school. And I'm like, if that's what preaching is, I think that's what I'm called to do. And so I realized when you preach every week, that's not exactly the preaching you do in your home congregation. When you start to bring that conference preaching, that prophetic preaching to your local congregation, they're going to get tired of it. That rubber band's going to stretch too much. It's going to break. And people are going to challenge you. And you've heard it like I have. We just need to keep politics out of the pulpit. That race stuff, I mean, that's just too difficult. So leave that in other spaces, write a book. But this is not the place for it to preach on it. So yeah, I'm actually trying to imagine right now, and I'd love for the conversation to go this way, thinking about the shitstorm right now, thinking about the response of churches. Certainly we have the civil rights movement to look back on, but the confessing church is a place I've thought a lot about. And I often wonder, what if there was a place for not just the Bonhoeffers of the world that were going to, sacrifice their lives potentially for this, the confessing church, the Pastors Emergency League, but who are those German Lutheran pastors that if they'd been given a space to work within subversively, to continue as part of that, might have at one point spoken up when the moment was needed, might have put chips away and put capital away. But it's really hard when you put that capital away. When you have a mortgage, it is really difficult to get up and say the things that you feel like you're called to say. And I have those conversations all the time, still with pastors, that they're like Nicodemus at night conversations, not to compare myself with Jesus, but they don't know who else to go with. And so they talk to the crazy guy that got fired, and they say, how do I do this? How do I manage those conversations in my church? And I want to be helpful to those pastors. I think there is a place for it, but we also need some voices that are going to be loud and are going to be clear. And I'm hoping I'm one of those voices that's helpful to others in this journey, just as you have been as well, Jeremy.
That's good, Collin. Okay, so let's elaborate on that. Let's talk about, because I think there are a lot of pastors who are showing up week after week. They're preaching. They're trying to be faithful. They're trying to, the analogy that has been explained to me, and I think the analogy works in a lot of ways, is that, leading a church is like running a merry-go-round. You got to spin the merry-go-round, but you have to do it at the right speed. If you go too fast, you fling everybody off. If you go too slow, it's not a fun experience for anybody. So that's the speed, and, to which I said, well, then I'm the guy that runs that thing way too fast, cannot slow it down, and I'm just launching people, all over the place, which I think maybe some people that have attended a church that I led would be like, yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. You launched us all over the place.
Yeah.
So that's where I realized, like, oh, I don't want to be the guy running the merry-go-round, right? Like, that's not for me. But you're bringing up, I think, a hopeful possibility that maybe there are those people who are running that could be reached, could be partnered with, could be empowered to maybe speed it up a little bit, or say, hey, there's a moment. The thing that I wrestle with, and I'm curious if you have any hot take on this, when you look at like this regime right now, this presidency, and literally the daily onslaught we get of what's going to be added today. And as of this recording, the latest was, our sitting president posting a photo of the previous administration, the Obamas, him and his wife, their faces on a picture of monkeys, which if you Google that, the research or the history of that is an incredibly blatant racist. I mean, there's no way you can defend that and go, oh, it's just a joke. Like it's a racist joke. Like and he knows exactly what he's doing. And so I'm looking at that, and the thought I had today is like you can't defend that. And I think early on people were like, yeah, but it's about the babies, or it's about, there was something to defend. I think we're at a point now where I would look at someone and go, I don't think you can in good conscience defend any of this. The only thing you can really do is choose silence, right? Is to say, I'm just going to avoid it. I'm not going to talk about it. And that whole idea of like, I'm just going to preach Jesus. Like, I'm just going to, and I think they do that. There are pastors I think do that with a good heart. There's also ones that do it out of cowardice. Like, let's call it what it is. I have to pay my mortgage. I'm afraid of, what people would say to me, or the emails I would get, or, there's conflict there. But as we talk about this, because there's a ton of pastors there, there's a ton of churches there. Probably a lot of our listeners attend a church like that, where they're like kind of wishing, could we say more? Could we do more? How do we reach that person? How do we get them to speed up the merry-go-round? What do you think can, when you see everything going like, okay, now, like, what I mean? I struggle with, if you've got to this point and none of it has been enough for you, I don't know what could be enough. Like, that's where I think kind of give into despair. So speak some hope to me today, Collin. What is it that we can look at and go, hey, maybe we can appeal to this, or maybe this might work? What have you found?
Here I am. I'm the guy being asked for hope. It's like every time Christian Dume gets interviewed, that's the question at the end. Every time Ta-Nehisi Coates gets interviewed, that's the question at the end. I don't know what kind of hope to offer, but it is the work that I'm setting out to do. And if I'm not willing to go into those spaces and offer that possibility, then I need to go do something else. And so, I'm grateful for the space I get to live in myself, to be able to speak boldly. But I'm trying to imagine that space right now for those that, whatever it is, whether it's the mortgage or it's trying to hold their church together. There's a lot of good there. I've talked to pastors just the last few weeks that have said, I always imagined I would be the Bonhoeffer. Like, I would be the one who would be willing to sacrifice my life. But I've got a diverse church. There's some good things that are happening. I just don't want to blow this thing up on my watch. And so I'm trying to imagine if it is good, goodwill, right? That's being asked there. If they're being honest about what that is, what is the way that you bring courage to those people and not have them continue to be radicalized by silence in those communities that they're going to go to when they know, Collin's not somebody I can talk to walk through this. At the same time, if you don't have a red line, and a red line that's communicated to people that have spoken out, then you're just putting chips away and you're never going to end up doing anything. So there has to be, on both sides, right? There can't be disdain and disgust that doesn't allow for people to do things in different ways in different spaces. At the same time, today would be one of those days. You talked about that incident today, and I'm watching some voices speak out that I haven't before. I hope this is one of those moments. When this show comes out, my guess is we'll forget about this because it'll be the next thing that's on the merry-go-round in this administration. But there has to be a red line. There has to be something that, when that happens, and I don't know how you haven't had the red line yet. I don't know how you can get to this point, and that is still a red line. It's further out there. But if we're going to have a hope of a tipping point, it's going to be those early adopters that are going to speak out. But at some point, there's going to have to be that middle ground, those people in the middle. I've heard the stat recently from those that are talking about how do you take down an authoritarian regime when it comes to a nonviolent resistance. And the numbers that are there are 3.5% of the population that need to step up and be in the streets to somehow nonviolently resist that move. That sounds like such a small number, but that gives me some hope. Because the thought is, if 3.5% of our people are out there, right? We saw Minneapolis recently. I think we're getting close to those figures in some cities in Minneapolis. If we can get to that 3.5% mark, all those people who are silent all of a sudden feel the need to move in. And we saw that in 2020. It was a blip on the radar. It wasn't as committed as it needed to be. But those people are there. The people with black squares, they're watching. They're in that middle ground. And my hope is this can be a moment in the midst of this administration. We don't know what's ahead, but it is a time that we've got to make sure we're not casting everyone out of our circles and saying, okay, now's the time. Are you ready to speak up? It's time for that red line to be crossed and for you to join this. If you've been building chips, now's the time to spend them. It's time to get out there. And so that's the hope I have. I'm trying to do things better than I knew how to. I think I made some mistakes when I was in ministry that I think our ministry is trying to help others do better. So I think I've got some learning to do to help others, but it's still going to take courage. It's still going to take that risk that you may not be there the next Sunday. It's still going to take the fact that people are going to say some things about you and take you down along the way. But we need people of courage in this moment. I hope that red line is something that those pastors are thinking about. What is the red line? What would be too far? What is it a generation from now my kids are going to ask me about? That's what motivated me, right? It was, if my grandkids are going to ask me about this, I want to be on record. I want to be in the streets when it was right. I want to be naming the right thing and explaining and trying to put on display a kingdom that is far better than the one that I see lived out in our church culture so often.
Okay, so interesting on that point, because I've said that line too of like, hey, I want to be faithful to, like, when this story is told, I want to be the idea of like being on the right side of history, or telling your future generations like, here's what I said, here's what I did. And I watched someone recently challenge that idea, and I thought this was an intriguing argument. And they said stop talking about being on the right side of history and stop talking about future generations applauding you. Because what they were saying is, you may need to do something good that future generations won't even understand. And I thought that was an interesting, like, make room to go. History may not even, at the point it's told or whatever, might not even acknowledge what we were doing. But we may need to do something good in this moment that not only is going to be misunderstood in this moment, might be misunderstood by my kids or my grandkids. You know what I mean? And that was just an intriguing idea. What do you think about that? That like maybe there's something even messier, even harder than history would play out.
Yeah, I mean, even that thought that history will tell the story differently, or one day it'll be, the martyrs will get told in a beautiful way of what's happened. That assumes some kind of like omega point, like movement, that things are progressing and moving to a better place where future generations are getting there. And I'm tired right now, especially in racial justice spaces, of people of a previous generation getting asked the question, well, aren't things better now than what they were? And I'm sorry, when I saw those tiki torches in Charlottesville, I gave up that vision. I realized that, when I see the Nick Fuenteses of the world and others that are gaining adherence with younger generations, younger men in particular, we can't assume that future is going to be the future. And so doing things just for the right reason, because it's the right thing to do, no matter what the cost may be, that ought to be enough. There are going to be some, though, that are going to need those other leverages or things that come along the way. So, yeah, I think it's something to throw out to some to say, hey, this has been an example before. We can talk about how hated Dr. King was in that moment, right? And we want to glamorize him and tell a much mythologized story today. But he's beloved in ways he wasn't. So that hope's there, but it's not a guarantee. And that future hope that things are just moving to a better place, I want to keep that hope as a person that believes in the cross, the resurrection, that God is going to restore all things one day, that's where things are headed. But I have less hope about that than I have in previous moments where I preached so boldly and clearly that there was no doubt that that's where the universe was headed, was the arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice in a sense. That's my hope, but it is not a guarantee.
It is interesting just listening to you talk about hope. When you're in this space, that is such a fragile commodity, right? You can't give it up. You can't say, hey, I'm going to go into this work and have no hope. At the same time, I resonate with what you said, like, why do I got to give the hope? That's how I feel all the time. Like every time I get up there, it's like, why do I have to give you hope? And so I do struggle with that of like, there's days where I just want to throw the towel in, like, you win, like it's too much, and I don't know what to do with this. And then yet, you go, well, if I'm going to follow this Jesus guy, that's not one of my options. I got to keep going. And, for anyone who's only audio only on this, I'm wearing my Portland Resist shirt in honor of this conversation today, which I think, shout out to all my Oregon peeps. But I love the frog resistance image. I think is so beautiful of, we're going to keep showing up. We're going to do it nonviolently. We're going to do it creatively, right? We're going to make your violent fascist regime look silly because we're going to resist you in a Portland or a frog suit, and I love everything about that. And I think to me, that's just like a reminder of like, I mean, it's just a simple icon, like show up, like be the frog, keep going, like keep dreaming. And if we do have the Holy Spirit, should we not have an infinite well of creativity to draw from, that every moment the Holy Spirit can guide us into some new alternative, right? Not because we're brilliant or we're going to solve it, but because we're tapping into something greater than us. So that's the hope I have, and it's helpful to have other people who are in this work and go, let's talk about hope together. What I think would be fun is to talk about, so you are the Strategic Development Director of LTR Ministries, which sounds very official these days. So good job on that. I hope you make it a year, because
That's right.
It sounds cool. And I was looking through the website, and there's an explanation on the name. And so it says, we believe conversations are the first step in a journey of reconciliation. Therefore, let's talk. That's the L and the T. Then it says, next is the R, which we believe can stand for several things. And then there's 4 things mentioned on the website, 4 R's. And I thought these would be fun just to go through each of these, and let's talk about how you see this playing out in the world right now. So the first one is, let's talk race. We believe that we have to talk about race. We need to have conversations about the spiritual, historical, and societal impacts of race and racism in America. What do you think?
Yeah, this was like the last thing we wanted to talk about in the church setting I was in. So it is a new world, but we're trying to go into, our ministry is actually designed to talk to white Christians in particular. And that's because so many of our friends of color, 2020, racial reckoning, all, on and on, we can go back to decades, but they're tired of it having to be the ones that are always educating us, right? So they're saying, look, there are books out there, there are documentaries. You can do this work. You don't have to depend on us and the secondary trauma that always comes as you ask the questions that you do. So we are trying to take on that trauma for them. We're trying to have those hard conversations, maybe be somebody that's white talking to other white Christians in particular, that they know there's questions they shouldn't ask other spaces, but maybe this is at least the right place. And that's on the way to the multiracial conversations that need to take place. So we want people to have conversations with their black and brown neighbors that they've never talked to. They think they're best friends. They use that as a talking line all the time. Well, my best friend is so-and-so. Well, you may think they're a friend, but if you've never talked about race with your friend of color, there's a good chance that you think this relationship's deeper than it is for them. They don't feel like that's a safe place maybe they can go with you. And so we're trying to prepare the conversation, maybe open people's eyes in a way, provide lenses. And that's what that history, the theology and the sociology, those 3 lenses are trying to help white people see what we're so often blind to. In my experience, I grew up in a predominantly white church. I grew up in a private Christian school, what I sometimes refer to as a segregated academy, because it started with intention in a particular era in Dallas when integration was taking place. And my dad went there the generation before me, and there I am. Well, that shaped the way I saw history. That shaped the way that I saw the Bible, right, in the fundamentalist group that we were in. And so I was blind to so much until I finally was in my 30s, and it was a mentor of mine, Dr. Taylor, a professor at the school I went to, who invited me to a racial unity summit. And all of a sudden, I'm uncomfortably trying to talk through race in a way that I'd never been prepared to do. And so I just wanted to be silent. I didn't want to say anything wrong. And that is what we find in so many people, is good-hearted people, but they don't want to talk about it because they know they could be canceled. They know they could say something that would blow up a friendship or a relationship. But we can't hide from this. We got to be able to gain the tools. And that's what we want to do, is not just send you out to do it. We want to prepare you for those conversations so that maybe there's less harm that happens, even though we're not going to do it perfectly, when you do engage those conversations with either church members that may be of different races. Maybe you have a family that's growing diverse in different ways. We're trying to prepare white people for those conversations. These conversations are open to all. And so we do find value when there are people of color that are in these classes and they're able to give personal experience to how this isn't just historical. This has ongoing impact. And so, yeah, let's talk race. We must talk about race. Class is important too, but sometimes we go to the class conversation, we miss how race has been a huge factor in our church's history and still has ongoing effects. We see it on this administration, this president's social media today.
I recall, when 2020 and this kind of all really escalated to a different level, the popular thing was, one of the things that I got in trouble for was saying Black Lives Matter. I said that in the pulpit, and then I had someone tell me, you're not allowed to say that in the church, and they weren't mad that I was, because I wasn't plugging the organization Black Lives Matter. I was just making a statement. Hey, church, can we acknowledge Black Lives Matter? And they're being threatened right now in a unique way. That was just, to me, that's low hanging fruit, right? And then I got all this pushback, and then the response was all lives matter. And that became the rhetoric for a while. And I remember sitting down with people and, they like truly couldn't understand. Like, why would you say Black Lives Matter? Why would you not say, that blue lives matter and you don't care about that? And I remember sitting down explaining, no one is born a blue life. That is a job that they chose. And like watching like slowly a light bulb go off of people. Like, so you want to equate someone being treated the way they're treated because of the color of the skin they were born with someone choosing a job that puts them in harm's way, right? Which again, you can acknowledge there's a lot of officers who do really good work and are very courageous. We can make room for that, absolutely. But that's a job they chose, right? Like no one made them do that. So to say that these are the same thing and, to put like where I live, I still see the stickers with the American flag and the blue line through it all the time. I mean, every day I probably see this. And it's just like this reminder to me of like, we are so tone deaf as white people to this conversation. What do you say to the person that maybe even is listening to this episode right now and is like, come on, like this is not a big deal. You guys are making it a big deal and truly doesn't see why we need to talk about race. What have you learned to like help people maybe take that step out to go, no, it's a bigger deal than you think it is?
Yeah. I think back to the same sermon I preached and I talked about Black Lives Matter. I get the same pushback of, are you saying the organization, here's what that organization believes. And it was a principle of value that seems so obvious to me, but if it isn't obvious to everyone, it wasn't probably for me at one point. And so I have to be aware of that and be persuasive, invite people into conversations that can open their eyes a bit. That's what we do. But I remember giving the analogy at the time of like, okay, this all lives matter type stuff. Like if there's a fire in a neighborhood, right? And there's a house that's on fire and, the fire department comes out, tries to put that blaze out. It would be bizarre for someone to come outside their house and say, why are you putting water on this house? That doesn't make any sense. We have a whole neighborhood that needs water, that needs support. Well, the house is on fire right now. Like it is time to take care of that matter right then. And then we can talk about something larger. And really it's going to help your house not catch on fire if we put this out first. It actually has benefit for all those who are around it.
Which is a great point to add to someone. Like if you think your house isn't connected to that house, you're living in a delusion.
Yeah, I think about Jesus in the Beatitudes, right? About, blessed are all these different groups he speaks to. I'm just imagining like in that crowd, like somebody the same way that we heard after our sermon going up to Jesus saying, the poor in spirit, Jesus, don't you mean blessed are all people? Like that's the
all
blessing
people are blessed.
All people are blessed. And it's like,
that's an amazing application of that.
There's a point that he's trying to make with a particular group of people that he's healed in chapter 4 that are there on that mountain. They've been ostracized. They've been out of community. And he's trying to speak a word to a particular audience, a particular group of people who did not feel blessed in that moment. This morning, I was down at the Dallas ICE field office. It's a place that I found where a clergy group in Dallas is doing work of clergy accompaniment. We have Latina organizers that are down there. They're doing incredible work for people that are coming for what are just their normal appointments. And that same point that you made about the blue lives, I mean, we want to maintain the humanity of everyone who are there. We pray for the souls of the ICE officers because what they're doing is putting their souls in danger, right? There's a dehumanizing effect to what they're being trained to do and what they're doing every day. They got to make a living, but it is doing something to them. And it's important for us to speak about that, but not dehumanize. We want to keep that in mind. But we are there first and foremost for our migrant friends who are coming to that detention center who don't know what they're about to encounter. I prayed with somebody just this morning that was just terrified. They just needed a word of comfort in the midst of going in. And I'm not praying for outcomes. I've learned long enough that you don't pray for outcomes and know what's going to happen. This is out of our control, but praying that God would be with them and that the presence of God would be with them as they go in, as they think, if I could just say the right phrase, then maybe they'll let me out this time. And then the family members that are going to be devastated 2 hours later, we know because more and more people are detained. But there's a difference between being an immigrant in this country and taking a $50,000 bonus and going to work for an organization. That's a different identity. It's one you choose. And so our solidarity in this moment looks like standing alongside while also seeking not to dehumanize. And there have been plenty of justice movements that have been able to do those two things, to name where the problem is, to put the fire out in the house where it is right now, to name where the systemic injustice is. And race is just one of those many things that we have to pay attention to and talk about.
That's so good. Why do you think we're not hearing as much all lives matter right now?
True. That's a great question. I don't have an answer to that. I haven't heard that phrase in a real long time. Maybe it is because we stopped saying Black Lives Matter is the problem or Brown Lives Matter. So maybe
my wife brought that up to me the other day, and I thought, that's interesting. We don't say that anymore. And it's not because they're suddenly not, those houses aren't on fire anymore. But, you know, I think the pieces of the game have been rearranged in such a way that the whole narrative is different now. The whole conversation is different now. Who's in power? Who's, you know, and it's just it's very interesting when you have all these phrases that were so heated, so much a part of so many conversations, and then you watch how they age, you know, how they play out. And I think that.
Does anyone remember CRT? I don't even remember what the letters stand for anymore, right? No one brings that up.
See, that's I haven't thought about that in a while. That's a fascinating, critical race theory. Haven't thought about that. Haven't heard that in a while. Because my knee-jerk reaction is these conversations have been squashed at a major, you know, like upper level. We're not talking about them. And we've literally watched, you know, the Trump administration like remove these talking points, remove these conversations, remove so much literally of, you know, they're trying to remove the history. The history's there, that's but right. Like the record of the histories, you know, in these different ways of like, no, we're not talking about that. That's not a thing anymore. And it is wild to be a part of it. Because then you go, oh, how do you keep doing the work when the conversation keeps changing? And now, you know, you got to meet people where they are and what they understand. But man, is it funky right now. All right, so that was the first R. Second R, let's talk real. We know that these conversations are going to be hard. They are going to get real, and they are going to challenge all of us. And Collin, we both know from personal experience, the church is not great at this, at having real conversations. How do we talk real conversations?
Yeah. Yeah, when I look back on the sermons I preached, like I was trained, right? Newspaper in one hand, Bible in the other. But man, that newspaper went away a lot more than just the Bible that I was trying to, you know, pick up and exegete and bring something of meaning to people. You know, we're inviting people to have real conversations in this space. We're trying to create the kind of safety that they can talk about that. We talk in our curriculum about that shame is not a helpful place to go in this conversation. We realize that you're not somebody who probably owned slaves, but that doesn't mean that we're not responsible for the impacts that have happened. And so we don't traffic in shame and guilt as the primary thing. There is that sense of godly sorrow that leads to repentance that I think Paul has something helpful there that he's pointing us to that we're trying to lean into. But we can't get real if shame is the place where people go. We just developed our second class, which is a Latin American class, which the timing couldn't be any better. And we're walking through in 3 weeks the history of colonialization of Latin America, the history of immigration law and what led to our current moment, the cycles that are there, and then the ongoing effects that are there in the Latina community. And Dr. Robert Chow Romero, who's professor at UCLA, has helped us develop this curriculum, written a great book called Brown Church, or the Brown Church, and it is just wonderful. It's speaking to the beauty of liberation theology and Mission Integral and these theological frameworks that I wish I'd gotten a lot sooner because it would have been helpful for what I was trying to do. But there's this richness to the church in Latin America that I wasn't taught because it was mostly white professors and mostly white textbooks that we were reading from. And but when we get to the end of like 15 minutes of just this is what happened to these indigenous cultures, this is what happened, the only place people know how to go is to that kind of shame piece. And right now we're trying to think through, like in that curriculum, like how do we help people make a transition from that into, there are these beautiful things the church has done. Every time white supremacy does its worst, the church has done beautiful things in response. And often it's immigrant churches. Often it's black churches that have done this incredible work in the midst of Jim Crow and so forth. We need to look to them in this moment. We look back to Nazi Germany. We look to the confessing church. I mentioned that earlier. We've got our own example in the American church of the civil rights movement and the black church in that moment that we don't have to skip over that on the way to Germany. We've got examples in our own culture that we can look back to. And so, but moving people to seeing the positive examples, you got to tell the truth, and that's real. but you got to get people past their shame to where they can actually kind of grapple with and tell the truth. We talk also about the good bad binary. That in our culture, if you're racist is bad, obviously, and not being racist is good. And so we're careful not to say anything that would lead people to think that we're racist, which leads us to not having real conversations and just kind of not talking about it altogether. Because if we were to somehow let something out or put a video on our social media feed like we saw today, then everyone will know the truth about us. And so let's just not talk about it because it's difficult, it's hard, and let's keep the peace as if peace is just the absence of conflict and we can ignore it. That's a luxury that we have as people of privilege to be able to ignore conversations. So what we're asking people to do is to have real conversations, to dig into the truth of things, to speak to the truth of it, to admit what's going on inside of us and that anger is often the response. And how do we move that from spiritual formation from a moral outrage to what Gregory Boyles talked about as moral compass, right? That leads us to not react, but to respond out of the sense of the Jesus story and what we've committed our lives to. So that's the kind of real conversation we're trying to grapple with. And that good, bad binary keeps us from getting to hard conversations because we don't want to slip up and be told that we're racist. And we'll do anything to make sure that everyone knows we're not that. When the truth is we've grown up in an incredibly racist culture. There are things we are blind to. There's systemic realities that are at play. And I like to just start in that place that I am still a racist, right? I don't want that to be the case, but there are things I'm still learning when I'm at the tent at the ICE field office of things that I say that I have not yet picked up on. And the only way we make that better and make that a safer place is not me running away from those conversations. It's me humbly admitting I don't yet know what it is. I've learned a lot about African-American journey. I'm just now learning about the Latin American experience in Texas, where that's the majority of the population in Dallas that's growing. So we have to model that real conversation. We have to create the kind of safety for that kind of conversation, but we're pushing everyone on these calls to not just sit back and learn and make this a theoretical exercise, but to actually engage in real conversation. And the only way that can happen is if on the backside, our facilitators are ensuring that it is the kind of safe place where grace is a part of these conversations. And you're not going to be canceled if you ask the hard questions you have or slip up along the way.
Man, that's good. That good, bad binary. That's a word for someone today and I just was listening to you. I'm like, what if churches were known for that? Like, what if churches were known, like, oh, that's where you're going to have real conversation? Like, wouldn't that be so rad if that was the collective reputation of a local church community? Yeah. Like, if you want to have meaningful, real conversations, that's where they're going to take place. And so I would just encourage, like, anybody listening to this, if you are involved in a church, you have any leadership, any influence, like, what an invitation to bring that real conversation there. And, as I'm listening to you, the word that sticks out to me is curiosity. Like, are we curious to understand things that we don't understand? And sadly, many of us aren't. It's like, oh, I know what I know and I'm fine with that, versus, hey, as I hear your story, there's things I don't understand in that, and so, like, letting that create a curiosity to find out more. Like, hey, why did you have that reaction? Why do you think that? Why are you valuing something differently than I'm valuing something? All of those curiosity points are what leads to a really good, healthy conversation. So, man, that's so good. All right, third one. Let's talk reconciliation. We were given the ministry of reconciliation. This is the charge to the church, and we are challenged to understand what this means. Got a little bit of a churchy word there. How do we talk about reconciliation?
And we use that word reconciliation because it shows up in the scriptures, and that's helpful to some people. But man, my friends of color have said, really, is it reconciliation or is it conciliation? Like, to reconcile means it was once the way it should be, that those relationships were together. But conciliation admits it's never really been in that place. We're doing this for the first time. This is cutting edge word. So it fits the R scheme. But the reality is,
we don't have a C in there, guys. Come on. It's R's. Only R's.
That's right. We know how that is as preachers, alliteration. But yeah, reconciliation is difficult. We think about forgiveness, and those are different things, right? I mean, like, sometimes we run away from forgiveness because we misunderstand what it is. And we think that forgiveness is that we somehow ignore what took place, right? I mean, both of us can talk about harm we've experienced at the church, and it's not going to be helpful for us to be able to walk to a healthier place if we can't admit, hey, there's been some things that have happened to us. It's just, it's ungodly. It's unbelievable. There are people who would claim the name of Christ that would treat us and say the things that they've said. So we don't we don't hide from those things. We admit the truth of what's happened. Doesn't mean things that go back to trust automatically, right? I mean, just because we take a class and we go talk with our Black friend down the road or Latino friend down the road doesn't mean that they have to trust us fully. That is going to be a process. If we've ever harmed someone in our marriage or in relationships, we know that can be slow going. If we rush it, that's not going to be enough. So those are forgiveness conversations. Reconciliation, though, moves us into, let's talk about more R words, right? It's going to talk about repair. It's going to talk about repentance. It's going to be changing our minds, changing our behaviors, but it's also going to mean that something has to be repaired when there has been systemic injustice. That word reparation, that can be such a polarizing word. It's a vital conversation when it comes to these matters in our city. In the city of Dallas, if you were to divide the city by I-30, kind of being the dividing line north and south, similar geography in the north as in the south in terms of area, surface area. But get this, 85% of the tax base, of the tax that comes in is on the north side of I-30 in Dallas. That has to beg some questions about some things that have taken place that need repairing. That's environmental factors that have been the result of that. That's highways that have divided communities, that they've been dispersed. It's gentrification that's taking place in our cities. It's COVID health outcomes that we saw the same areas that were redlined in the 1930s and 40s, where they couldn't get investment because the home loan corporation wouldn't allow loans to go to places that were redlined. The same stats were there when it came to COVID, disparate impacts. There is a 26-year age difference of life expectancy for men in a certain zip code that is 2 miles away from another zip code in the city of Dallas. Like,
that's wild.
Anyone who cares, right, ought to be asking questions about why is that the case. It's not because a culture is less able to live longer. There are systemic factors that are at play there. There's economic disparity that's at play. There's education. There's policing that shows up different in communities. I mean, right now, the largest detention facility that's being considered to be placed in the United States in the midst of this expanding access is going to be, is looked at right now in Hutchins, Texas, southern Dallas County. Frisco's on the north side. That's where the Star is. That's where the Cowboys have their practices. That's where Jerry Jones has his developments on the north side of the city. Go Cowboys. But man, it's a conflict when I see these realities, right? I live in a neighborhood that he developed on the north side in Allen, in Dallas. Nobody's thinking about a warehouse in Frisco to put those people. They're going to put that on the south side of the city because that's where we built warehouses. They're going to peel the roof off. They're going to put cages in there. We're doing our best to see that doesn't happen in this place. The same thing's happening across the country. And so when you hear those realities, it's not enough to just say, would you forgive me for this? Forgiveness needs to be a part of this conversation, confession, repentance, but it's got to move past that. And so reconciliation is about learning. It's about growing in our awareness. It's about building deeper relationships and lament. But if we don't ever get to that question of what needs to be repaired, then it's just cheap forgiveness. It's cheap grace, in the words of other writers like Bonhoeffer that have spoken to this before. So yeah, it's not where we start, but it is definitely a part of where things need to go when it comes to the Christians and the churches that we're engaged in this conversation.
That's so good. Fourth one is let's talk regarding. There are subjects, I can't even say this with a straight face. There are subjects that have become taboo in the church to discuss. Have you found that to be true, Collin? Wow. How do we have meaningful, nuanced, helpful conversations about these topics? Have you found that there's taboo subjects to discuss in the church?
Yeah, race wasn't the only issue I had when I was in a local church context, that's for sure, right? I mean, on and on we could talk about the different topics, and we're open to that maybe there's a day where this moves beyond let's talk race conversation. I think taboos are there when we can't speak about something. It means it has like a power that we don't recognize. There's an idolatry most often there, that if we can't speak about something, it has us in ways we don't even recognize. So we're beginning this conversation about race. David and Shelley started this ministry. Part their son Jeremiah, they adopted. He was African American, and that opened their eyes to so much that they had not seen before about how do you raise a young black man in America. And so they had conversations with all their friends, just trying to find out, like, how do we raise him in a way that's going to make sure that he's safe? Because if we don't have certain conversations about the police or about any number of things, then we're not doing our job as parents. And so it was that journey that led them to see more. And that's true about race, but the same kind of curiosity that we spoke about earlier needs to be engaged on a whole matter of topics. So yeah, we're open to what that might lead us into expansion, but no, the church is not the best place so often to have these real reconciliatory, conversations that get us into a lot of different topics. So that's what your podcast is really all about, right? Is it's trying to speak to matters, and wine helps with it, right? That we'll see where I get as I pour another glass, but you've been there in the bar or in the wine bar where conversations just come in a way that they can't on Sunday morning. And my best conversations when it came to ministry were going to happen around a bottle of wine. And we're trying to do the same thing. Our faith community is centered around a table. The meal is centered in what we do. We share bread and wine around that table as well. It's not a worship experience that we center ourselves in. And that has just transformed the way that these people who've been, traumatized by the exclusion in certain segments, or just not being accepted for whatever reason it is, or a family member that's a loved one that they're trying to support, they can't get full support. Coming to our community and being around a table and being able to tell those stories has been vital to the kind of community we're trying to build. So I applaud you and what you're trying to do. I hope to make one of these trips down the line. If we can get another whiskey or wine trip down the way, I'll bring some people, but that's where it happens. And I think all of us know that, right? A Bible class on Sunday morning, a small group, it's going to be a hard place unless you've nurtured just kind of out of the ordinary skills to be able to have those conversations. And probably along the way, you've made some mistakes and had to repair some things as well. And that's not a problem. It should be something we expect in Christian community that's committed to each other. So yeah, regarding, we'll see where that takes us, but I've certainly experienced that taboo. I'm glad to be in freer spaces where those conversations are happening much more.
And you just summed up so much of the work I'm doing today, so much of my own journey. I think there are guys like you and I, and girls too, but that go into the church thinking this will be the place where you can have these real conversations, and with the best of intentions, right? And then when you discover in a lot of church settings you can't have these conversations, then you have that choice, right? Is you lower your voice, lower your volume, or you go somewhere else. And I'm thankful today I have found there are still churches that are willing to have these conversations, not as many as I like, or would love to see more of them, trying to create more of this to be normative for churches of like, hey, you can talk about some of these taboo things. But I think part of it is you have to create spaces like these. This is why I love the podcasting format, right? It's like, this is not a Sunday morning service. There is no elder board over this. These are just conversations we're having, and we're going to go wherever the conversation goes. And because of that, I want to this is not you as the strategic development director. This is you as my friend Collin. I want you just to speak for a moment, because there is an issue that has been near and dear to both of us, that not directly with the work you're doing, but I know led to some of your story. I think you would say you've changed your mind on LGBTQ inclusion. I have as well. We both came from a different world, a different understanding, and at some point realized, hey, the way the church is handling this isn't right. And then we both found out the hard way, this is very taboo. You are not allowed to, there's like this one, and then if you change your view on hell, are the two that will get you booted out of Christian communities faster than anything else. And, to this day, I have many people who I think are convinced I'm not a Christian because of my view on those two things, right? And it's like, okay, that's fine, but that's just showing you how taboo this is. Just speak for a moment. Why is the gay community and all that has been done to them, why is that so taboo, and how do you see churches making more space for that?
Yeah. Where to go on that, right? Like, our community, we have a faith community of probably, 50 people that kind of come around our space from time to time. It's rarely that on a regular Sunday evening when we meet together in a home. But about half of that community is the LGBTQ community. We've had 4 weddings in the last 6 months. And these were individuals that grew up in evangelical spaces. Many of them spoke against homosexuality or same-sex attraction, as they might have spoken about it in the past, but they recognized at some point that this is my identity, this is who I am. These are people that are following Jesus. They were leading Bible studies in mega churches in the Dallas area. Some of them were executive assistants for senior pastors that you've seen on social media. And when this came out, it was one of the only issues that would have ensured that as soon as they recognized that, as soon as they admitted that was where they are, and that they weren't going to be side B, they weren't going to be out of relationships and trying to remain celibate, that was the end of it. Your job's done. Mm-hmm. And I could tell those stories. It's not mine to tell, right? It's their story to tell. But to be a space that they can come as they're trying to sort through all that. When they were going to go to the justice of the peace and get married because their family might not show up, and now we're able to throw them wedding showers, and then they decide maybe there are people that would actually be there at the wedding if we were to host that. And the ways they, like, in Jesus-centered ways, fruit of the Spirit ways, are having conversations with people that will not show up to their wedding, or they will show up and they're going to be problems at their wedding. And they're having curious, confessional, humble conversations with their loved ones. They're representing Jesus in a far better way than so many that I've seen in churches, and the ones that they're engaging with ever have. The staffs that kick them out, even though they've done great work in graphic design or in worship ministry or whatever it may be. So to watch these people and to see the fruit of the Spirit in their lives, I don't know. I think segregation was a way for us to not encounter people of different races, so that we didn't have to admit the Spirit of God was within them and that they were good people, and that our stereotypes don't stand in the end. And the same thing is true when it comes to sectarianism in churches. I grew up in quite a sectarian movement. It was the Baptists we were nervous about, the Southern Baptists, if you can believe that.
Those liberals.
And those liberals, they didn't take communion every Sunday. They had instruments. Churches of Christ didn't even have instruments. And oh my gosh, we can go on and on about that. That's another world. But like the segregation of that, the prevention of relationships, deep relationships, where you encounter people who actually look more like Jesus, have the Spirit of God, they have humility in ways that you don't see with people that want to talk all day about those 6 verses in the Bible, that must be enough, while there's thousands of verses about poverty and wealth and what Sodom's really about, right? As Ezekiel tells us, like, we could get into each of those verses, but ultimately, like, how do you deny the Spirit of God that you see in an individual, where you see the fruit of the Spirit of these people that are trying to love their Christian neighbors in ways that they shouldn't have to. They shouldn't have to walk back in and to seek forgiveness with people that have kicked them out of their jobs. But they've found a space in our faith community and in a collective of churches that I'm a part of, that has been a great gift to me to imagine what could be next. And I know there's a lot of reason not to leave your faith community. There's a lot of people right now that are listening to the show that they're still in that mega church. They're still in that space they grew up in, and they're scared of what that might mean. Maybe they're raising kids and they're wondering, man, if we don't have the children's ministry, the youth ministry, like, how are they going to find friendships? They're going to be the kind of, there is hope on the other side. Speaking about hope, like, we have 5 churches in the Dallas area. We live in Dallas, which is an area where this can happen. In other places that may not be the case, but we have an area youth ministry with these small churches that can't host a youth ministry on their own, but we have similar values. And our kids are so protective about the people they invite into the space, because they know that their non-binary friends and their gay friends and their transgender friends, they need a safe space they can show up. So just because they have a friend at school that may be Christian, that doesn't mean that's necessarily going to be the space that they need to be, because they are protective of this inclusion that we try to host in our spaces. To see our kids nurture that is an incredible thing. So yeah, my youngest kid may not know the books of the Bible and the song that I learned growing up in the same way. I'll work on that one of these nights ahead. But what I do love is the relationships that have formed on the other side, the way that they're seeing. My youngest daughter was going to summer camp at the university I went to school at in West Texas. And I mean, I'm 4th generation, they would be 5th generation. There's every assumption they would go there. My grandfather was the chairman of the board of that university. My dad was the chairman of the board of that university. I'm not going to be, for obvious reasons that we've talked about here, but they go to summer camp, and I'm more nervous of them to be at that summer camp than I am with this church that has half of our community being LGBTQ people, because I know the Spirit of Christ is going to be found here, and I'm just nervous of whether that'll be the case where they go. And so, man, I can't encourage enough curiosity, but also get outside of your circles. Move outside of the fear of, if I'm not here, there may not be something for me. There are people that are longing for the kind of safety that you can provide. And there's all kinds of curiosity and learning you're going to find, and you're going to disrupt all those stereotypes that you learned growing up if you'll move into those new spaces. So whether it's a wine tour with Jeremy or it's a faith community you've never stepped into, do it. Like, take that step this month. This is Black History Month. I hear Black churches say, come join us. I know that can be nervous. You may think you're intruding on other space, but that's one of the best things you can do in this race conversation. Put yourself under a leader of color. Find out the fact that they have incredible preachers that are speaking to this moment in a way that many white churches I see are not. I'm preaching right now in more Black churches than I'm white churches, partly because I've been leading in this conversation. I've never been more received. I've never been more welcomed and thanked for being willing to enter in and to tell the truth. And that seat's there for you as well. Maybe it's just this month, maybe, or in a month to come, you're going to go and visit a church. I mean, they may be wary about you, wondering what you're there for. It doesn't take long for them to bring that wall down if you're truly curious and humble. So yeah, I couldn't encourage more just that breaking of stereotypes and moving outside of the spaces that you may feel safe in that are really not safe for so many people and may not be for you and your kids as much as you think they are.
That's a word today, Collin. Man, that's good. All right, we're going to transition now. We're going to do our rapid fire questions. We'll see how your answers compare with everybody else. We'll start with some wine questions. If I had to ask you, best glass of wine you've ever had in your life, is there a story that comes to your mind? What was the bottle? What was the setting? Who are you with? What's the best glass of wine you've ever had?
Yeah. This took some time to get to. I was in a teetotaler family growing up. Like, this was not my world, and gratefully that is a different story today. But I can tell you exactly where it was. It was in Northern California. It was a resort setting. It was at Cordoval Resort, just south of San Jose. We were with some friends that we developed close relationship with, and we got a bottle of wine on the patio that night. We had just deep conversation, beautiful setting. We weren't in Texas, which means, of course, it's more beautiful than where we are with the concrete jungle all around us. I don't know why we're there. Every time we travel, we're like, why do we live here? We have a calling here, I guess. But I remember that it was a Camus Cabernet Sauvignon 2020 bottle. Every time I go to a restaurant today, more expensive than I want to buy every time I'm there. But if it's an anniversary, if it's when maybe I'm at a grocery store and I find that bottle for a little less than I might find it at a restaurant, I'm going to pick up that bottle. It has meaning every time we open that cork, my wife and me, these friends, just because of what that conversation became, because we had a bottle of wine, a great meal with us. I'll never forget that moment. That's my favorite bottle of wine. It's what I always go back to. Even though there's probably greater bottles out there, I need to get out. I need to go on one of your tours and learn a lot more than what I have. But yeah, that's the bottle I look for anytime I get my hands on it, because it takes me back to that moment.
Love that. All right, which member of church history would you trust to pick out a bottle of wine for you? And which member of church history would you not trust?
Oh, man. So many places you can go, right? So my wife and I, we had our 20th anniversary a couple of years ago when the Olympics was in Paris. It was a trip of a lifetime. We got to go to the women's gymnastics final on that trip. But part of that trip, we got to do a champagne wine tour in the only place that really should be calling it champagne, I find out, right in that area of France that we were in. And so we went on this wine tour, and we got to tour this church, and I had no idea the history of it, but Dom Perignon, I found out the history. I saw the grave of where he was buried. This is this French friar, right, who was part of making wine better in France. All right, this is lighter wine. This is sparkling wine. This is champagne. But Dom Perignon's my guy, right? I'll never forget that trip. But I remember,
this is a good pick.
I remember the picture. I remember he's a Benedictine, and what could be better than that? Revolutionized winemaking. So he's the guy that I'm gonna pick in church history.
That's a solid pick, Collin.
For it, yeah.
Okay, who do you not trust to pick out a bottle for you?
All right, so I've been getting into this wine game a little bit more. We're in a wine club for the first time, so I've been trying to kind of understand better the history. And so obviously one of the things that stood in the way, probably shaped the movement I grew up in, this teetotaling movement, was people trying to get rid of alcohol altogether in the early 20th century. And there's a woman that I need to educate your crowd about. Her name is Carrie Nation. Some called her Mother Nation. For the charity and religious work she did. So she was definitely a person of faith, but her nickname was Hatchet Granny. I love this story. So during the American temperance movement, she attacked alcohol serving establishments with a hatchet. Like, I think I grew up with this woman in my church, right? And her fight against alcohol went from simple protest to greeting bartenders with pointed remarks like, "Good morning, destroyer of men's souls." Like, that is great.
With a hatchet in her
woman.
hand.
With a hatchet in her hand. She would smash liquor bottles in saloons, no fear. So anyway, in fact, she described herself this way. She said, "A bulldog running along at the feet of Jesus, barking at what he doesn't like." That's how she wanted to be described. So, yeah, Hatchet Granny.
I mean, these might be two of the best answers we've ever got to this question, Collin. So you've done your research. That's that's remarkable. Well done. Well done on that. Okay, what's something you used to believe that it turned out later you were wrong about?
All right, so we haven't gotten to this conversation at all today, so it may take a little setup. But last year I did a fellowship in public witness. And so that's the question of like, how do we bring our faith to the public square? Part of my background was lead pastor. I also worked in the Texas State House for a state representative as a communications director 2 sessions ago, which, talk about a shitstorm. That was something. But it was in blending those two worlds and trying to bring that together that I realized, like, I have a history that's really interesting in the movement I grew up in, the seminary I was trained in. There's a history that I actually, for 12 years, I did not vote, not out of apathy, but out of like a theological conviction. Like it was kind of that apolitical, almost more Anabaptist kind of view of things. There's a guy named David Lipscomb in my faith tradition that after the Civil War, he wrote a book called Civil Government. He said, look, Christians shouldn't serve in the military. They shouldn't be a magistrate or work in political office. They shouldn't even vote because that's actually wrong. And so I think it was actually my head. It's easy as a preacher to do that, right? Like, why? I mean, you have to explain why you didn't vote because that's like something you're supposed to do, of course, as a preacher and a Christian or whatever. But like I was at least able to be that neutral space, which Jamar Tisby's been so helpful to say, hey, like justice takes a side. That's been a learning for me because in ministry, I was taught so often to like never take a side, right? Mm-hmm. To keep it out of the pulpit. But for me, I didn't vote for 12 years out of theological conviction. It was after the 2016 election that I decided I've got to change this. And it was my friends of color that were so gracious to say, you know, Collin, I wonder if maybe you think you've washed your hands and you're clean of this because you don't vote. Like you're not. You have a history you need to dig into. That seminary that taught you all this, like there's some privilege that probably leads them to think that the luxury of being able to just opt out of this system is going to be to their benefit, but they can act like they're not, their hands aren't dirty. So I got my hands dirty in 2017 and ended up in the State House in a way I never imagined. So I'm still sorting through that journey of like, how do you engage politically in a way that's not helpful from partisanship and that's not helpful in churches. But the kingdom of God, like the message of Jesus is a political vision, right? It is an alternative vision to the ways of the world. The titles that Jesus bore, you know, of Lord and Savior and euangelion, the gospel, these are all political terms, ecclesia, right? And so I'm moving more into that world while trying not to be taken hostage by the empire that we live within. That takes some moral resistance, but that has changed completely over the last decade for me. I didn't vote in the 2016 election, and then I worked in the Texas State House for a state representative. So yeah, it's been a journey, but I'm not where I was.
Man, so many people can connect on different parts of that journey of yours. So I think that's super interesting. What do you see as like the main issue facing Christianity in America today?
Yeah, where do you start? There's so many different ways we could go. So there was a shooting that took place in El Paso, Texas. I was on a pilgrimage recently to El Paso, Juarez. Incredible journey, getting to talk with migrants who were stuck on the other side of the border. But there was a shooting that took place at the Walmart in El Paso. It's actually the most casualties of any mass shooting in modern American history. And the guy who perpetrated that shooting left from my neighborhood in Allen, Texas. And he didn't want to do it locally because he thought he might know someone and harm someone. So he goes to a place. He was all caught up in the great replacement theory, right? This theory that whites are being replaced and votes are being changed as a result of all these immigrants that are being invited in. We have this fear of scarcity as white people that's all around us, and it's shaping us in some very violent ways. It's shaping us in some very unchristian ways to respond in this cultural moment. A lot of it has to do with masculinity as well. Like I've got a son that I know if he gets in the wrong corner of the internet, it can be pretty quick of him getting radicalized in ways that we never would have imagined. And so trying to raise kids in this moment, trying to imagine the partners that our kids might have down the road and what they're being shaped by right now. And so I've got a question about like young men right now. I talked about tiki torches earlier in Charlottesville, how this isn't just changing. This is not just a generational problem of like we're a generation away of Jim Crow people dying and then we'll be in this haven. We know that that's not where things are necessarily going. And so trying to solve that question of white Christianity, of masculinity and how that works itself out. We're working on that in our ministry. I don't have all the answers right now, but I think it's a problem that needs to be solved. Right now, Texas has moved over that majority-minority divide. And so white people are no longer the majority in our state. That's often the case in cities in ways that isn't in rural places, but that's not the case all over the country, and it's coming. Like 2050, I think, is the date that or 2040, 50, somewhere in that range, we're going to see that flip. And we know what happens when there's progress, right? We saw it in 2020. There's that backlash, or that white lash, some have called it. And we're seeing that right now. There's a fear, there's a scarcity, there's a threat. And great replacement theory is creating some very violent moments right now. It's happened in our own county as a result of that theory itself. And so as much as there's spaces I don't want to go into, there are places that I have access to. That's what my friends of color said to me in 2020 was, okay, what's my work to do as a white guy in this work of racial justice? They said, as much as you want to come down here in the city of Dallas and do your work, please join us when the moment's right. Don't feel like you have to take the microphone from us because we've been here a lot longer than you have.
Yeah.
And I'm learning to do that. But they said, don't leave the boardrooms you're in. Don't leave the country club spaces that you might have access to. Don't leave the elder rooms that you're in. And it took a moment for me to kind of step out of that because I was bringing only anger and frustration into those spaces. But 3-4 years later, I feel like I'm at a place where I can enter back into those spaces. And so that's what I'm being asked to do by others that I'm in close proximity and relationship with. And so I want to lean into those problems. What does it look like for us to create a healthier alternative as we increase in minority status and maybe lose some of the privileges that have been there? But it is not persecution when you lose privilege. But sometimes we feel like it is. And so Richard Rohr, I'm going back to some of his work early on and kind of Wild Man, some of Adam's Return, some of those books about, and I'm wondering what would it look like to create the kind of retreat experience for young men where dads could bring their sons along and delve into some of the 5 things that he leaned into. It's not about you, you're going to die. Some of those values. I'm just curious about what that would look like to kind of create that kind of space. And as much as the dads may be bringing in the sons, I think we need the dads to go through that just as much. So that's one of the problems I'm trying to solve.
That's good. What's something blowing your mind right now? What are you learning?
Blowing my mind. You ask the greatest questions. They open up all kinds of things, right?
Oh, shucks.
What's blowing my mind? Today, it is it's the video that was shared by our president.
Yeah.
And every day it's something new, right? And I spoke earlier to the Hutchins Detention Center. Let me just say a word more about that. 80,000 beds is the goal that Homeland Security has said they need to increase. Right now in Dallas, what is holding up more detentions of our immigrant neighbors as they change the rules? They're coming for their green card appointments that they've been coming to for years. We've changed the rules. It's like in Texas, it wasn't the people across the border initially, the border crossed them, right? That's the history we're trying to tell in the Latin American story. Same thing's true when it comes to immigrants and asylum seekers. Yeah, of course there are people that have come here in ways they shouldn't have, or were against the law, again, civil problems, not criminal problems if we look at the letter of the law. But so many of these people, they're here and they're doing things the right way, as we've termed it. We want to talk about criminality. 62% of the people that have been detained at the Dallas field office have no criminal record in their background. That is not the bill of goods we were sold that many of the people we know voted for, right? That information has to get out there. But there's a 9,500 person detention center that is waiting to be, built here in Dallas. That blows my mind. And even those in the administration have said, we want to do this like Amazon has done packages. That is the level of dehumanization. We want to be able to move people there. And I'll tell you, right next to that property that we found out where that is, 1 million square foot property that they probably have already bought. They're on their way to it. They're able to hide this in ways that other groups can't because they're Department of Defense and this sort of thing. There's a railroad track that goes to Mexico, and it's cargo only. But I wonder, is that what the plan is, right? Just as the concentration camps and putting people on trains to go to their death, is that the deportation plan that may be ahead of us? And so the bottleneck right now for them in terms of detaining people is they don't have enough beds or spaces. We in Dallas are trying to figure out a way that doesn't happen here on our watch. And there are other cities that are doing the same thing. So my mind's blown by the level of dehumanization, the silence of churches in this moment. But we need solutions. We need people that are willing to be courageous and step into it. And so we're trying to do that. And I'm blown away by the people who are doing that, right? I mean, some of these Latino organizers, they've admitted that they're dreamers. They're people that are at risk more than the white clergy that are showing up. But they're willing to do that. And if they're willing to do that, who are we to say that we live too far from it or maybe we're at risk? This is the time to step up. And I'm being blown away by the people who are doing that right now. They're going to trainings. They're being activated. It gives me hope to see that. So that's that's the good part that's blowing my mind in the midst of the videos that are blowing my mind in a completely different way.
I love that. What's something you're excited about right now?
I'm excited about the Latin American class that we're launching right now. Dr. Romero is a gift to help us kind of construct this. But right now, it was in 2020 that we launched these classes, the Beginner's Guide to Conversations About Race. In the second class is when COVID came down. The third class is when George Floyd was murdered. There were 19 classes of white Christians that came around the dinner table from David and Shelley, our executive directors. We're just imagining, I mean, the timing's just right for all that we've developed over this last year for churches. And I'm thinking about churches that have Hispanic congregations that they have not thought through a safety plan for what they're going to do if ICE shows up at their doorstep. They have to be thinking through that. I'm thinking about the microaggressions they experience on an everyday basis when they're setting up church for third service, while the white people are leaving from first and second in churches. Like, it is incumbent on us, if we're going to have minority churches, immigrant churches that are meeting in our spaces or in our communities, to find out what we can do to make sure they're supported. I had a conversation just this last week with a Muslim that serves on a board in our community, a woman that I've gotten to know well, it's a friend. And she's saying, look, for us to ask the question about how we can make sure that our undocumented members may be safe and how they can be safe in our building, to ask that question to law enforcement is to put a target on our back. And that is something that white people can do. We can ask those questions without putting a target on others' backs and relay that information and stand in solidarity. And so I'm excited about this class. I'm excited for those who are going to take it. It'll be a hard lift for us to walk through it, but it just seems like the perfect timing for churches that are leaning into this conversation, especially in Texas and places like where you're living, Jeremy, in the South, where we're dealing with this border conversation that's been with us forever. We need new solutions, and I'm excited about the possibility of churches and Christians that'll be willing to lean into the conversation with us.
That's so good. All right, Collin, we've talked about a lot of things today. I'm amazed how much we've actually got to. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you're like, look, we can't close this episode till I get this in?
All right, so I don't have a book to promote, right? But you do. And so I wanted to offer you this short window to say, like, why should I be interested in your book, Jeremy? Like, when I could turn around and interview you, like, what is it that you would want to share that may not be your elevator pitch, but something interesting that you're thinking about that's going to get out there that you can't wait to get out there? I want to know, because I'm ready to buy this book and get the conversation started in my community.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. So I got a text yesterday from someone who's on our launch team and read an early copy of the book. And he said to me, I'm paraphrasing, but basically he said most books in this nature, like kind of the deconstruction kind of conversation, end with the conclusion of just burn it all down, right? He's like, there's very few voices like yours that are offering a different way forward. And I thought that was such a cool, like, from his point, like that was what his takeaway was, right? And one of the weird things about creating anything, right, is you make something that you believe in it, you know what it means to you, but you have no idea what it will mean to other people. And when other people engage in it, what is their reaction? What does it do to them? Writing a book is certainly like that, right? It's like you put it into it, but I have no idea what this book does to others. So when other people say, wow, this is giving me hope for a space I didn't have hope for, that was really cool to me. Of like, I think we, the idea is narrow framing, where you say, this is my only option, or this is my only option. It's like either burn it all down or go with the church as it is. I don't think those are our two options. I think we need to have a different imagination of how we have these kind of conversations, how we make space for these things, how we bring the best of all these different expressions of church today, both within the institutional church, within the deconstructing community, and create something new moving forward. That's what I'm really excited about. And so I hope that this book, we've been talking about hope in this conversation.
Yeah.
My hope is that this gives people a little bit of that sense of like, oh, there's hard stuff to do and we have the ability to do it. And the ability isn't because we won't talk about it. This is why I love so much of what you're working on. The solution is not burying our head in the sand and hoping it goes away. The solution is leaning into it, embracing it, and figuring out a new way forward. And so that's really what I hope the book is for people, of like, hey, you can navigate all these conversations and still love Jesus and still have community and still figure out what does it mean. How do you better love your neighbor? Like, all of it's still possible. I just think we need a better imagination for it.
I love it. I'm living that possibility. Like, it is possible. There is a community that can be developed, and there are people that are waiting on you to probably gather people around your table. And so, can't wait to read the book. Can't wait for our community to get to engage the ideas you bring in. And I'm glad you'll have a better answer for me about hope. It sounds like you've got something hopeful on the horizon.
Well, I've depleted all mine into the book. That's why I needed you to give me some more today, because I emptied it all into the book. That's all I had. Well, Collin, dude, this has been such a good conversation. I'm grateful to have known you over the years, to have walked vicariously through some of your journey with you. You are someone who embodies what it means to have values and then to live those values, right? Even when it costs you, even when you know this is going to be painful. I met you in a season when you were the lead pastor and you knew something really difficult was coming, and you did it, and you walked that road. And to even have, heard you talk about the 4 jobs and the 4 different years and how the turmoil of that, like so many people, especially listeners of this podcast, know that feeling of, that's in the last 6 years for me of like, what the hell am I doing now? Right. But you have just modeled it. You've been faithful in it. And to see you thrive today, to see you doing what you're doing today and the conversations you're having, man, it is so encouraging to be a part of it. And I am cheering for you. I've been cheering for you. I'm Team Collin for sure. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come on the episode today and sharing what I think are some really profound, beautiful insights that a lot of people are going to be blessed by.
Well, thanks for having the same courage, being a trailblazer ahead. And you've been such a gift to me on my journey. And every episode I look forward to finding out who it is you're introducing us to next in the book. And there's a community that's developing. And so we need to get together in person. Let's figure out a way to do it on the road.
Let's do it. On that note, friends, hopefully you've gotten a ton from this conversation, lots to think about and process, and do it with a great glass of wine, and it makes everything better. But we'll see you on the next episode of Cabernet and Pray.